Hey there, folks. So, my name is Dr. Ashakie Phillips. My pronouns are they, she, and doctor. And today I will be presenting my final capstone project at the California Institute of Integral Studies. And we're going to be chatting about informed exploration of MDMA. Now, the reason why I chose the term informed exploration is because harm reduction essentially implicits that by whatever somebody is doing, whether it's safer sex or safer ways of using drugs, that whatever that is harmful. And that me, as the person with the white coat in the room, is telling this person how to do less harm. I don't like that. There's a lot of stigma that comes with the term harm reduction. And so instead, I'd rather just simply chat about the who, what, where, how, when, and why of whatever it is that you want to do. I'd rather let folks explore in ways that works best for them while also having some information so that they can do it in what works as the safest way for that person. Okay, now here comes the disclaimer. So the views and opinions in this video, they don't necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions by the broadcaster, aka me, Ashakie, nor California Institute of Integral Studies. If you have a complaint about something we chat about today, please contact the FDA so that they can approve more randomized controlled trials. Essentially, folks, we're going to be talking about MDMA. It is not legal in any shape or form here in California. And so please know that nothing we're chatting about today is going to be evidence-based or in a clinical guideline. Everything that we chat about, it's going to be based off of anecdotal data and storytelling and underground. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not great information. It just means that this is not medical advice by any means. I'm going to give you what I found to be the best information to help you make an informed decision if you decide to do MDMA. But please know that truly, until there is more data by evidence-based research, all of this information can change at any time. So, what is MDMA? Some folks may call it ecstasy, Molly, biscuit, lover speed. Essentially, MDMA is a stimulant with hallucinogenic properties. Now, when MDMA comes into your body, goes into your brain, and has a good time, essentially it hijacks the brain's serotonin system. And by doing so, it also increases serotonin, dopamine, adrenaline, vasopressin, and oxytocin. Now, MDMA can affect you both psychologically and physically. As it hijacks the brain's serotonin system, it has a good time with this receptor in your brain that can have an effect on your imagination, stress coping, mood, personality. That's why some people say that they have empathy and euphoria when they take MDMA. Some folks may also notice an increase in pleasure, love, or even emotional bonding. By having an increase in some of these neurotransmitters, it also can have some pretty significant physical changes in your body as well. It's important to note these changes because this is going to be a big part of why you need to do some of the things I'm going to tell you need to do throughout this presentation. Now, not only can you have increased heart rate and increased blood pressure, you also can have increased temperature as well, or what we may call hyperthermia. Your thirst reflex also changes quite a bit. So some people may be either dehydrated or overhydrated because they're drinking excessive amounts of water. You may also notice some muscle aches and pains, some teeth grinding, jaw clenching. You may also notice a reduced appetite, heightened senses, excessive sweating, and skin tingling. Now, I think this is actually really important to point out because some people, they say, you know what, I want to take a little bit more MDMA than what this person told me in this presentation because I want more of what we were talking about in the last slide, the love and the euphoria. But please know that higher doses of MDMA, they actually don't affect that emotional or euphoric response. Eventually, there is a threshold though. However, it can affect that energetic response. And so you can find yourself feeling overly hot, overly anxious, overly stimulated, and that, my friend, is not the vibe. Now, because of those physical and psychological changes that can happen with MDMA, one can imagine that there's definitely some people in this world that should not take it. For example, if you have a history of chronic heart, liver, or kidney conditions, especially high blood pressure, MDMA is probably not for you. Same with if you're currently taking any medication that affects serotonin, dopamine, or adrenaline. Mixing MDMA with antidepressants such as SSRIs or certain supplements such as 5-HTP or St. John's wort is absolutely not recommended. I also do not recommend mixing MDMA with any other drugs or alcohol, and I include caffeine in that. Caffeine is a stimulant, so mixing a stimulant with another stimulant is definitely not a good idea. Same with if you have a history of serotonin syndrome or sensitivity to serotonin. Remember that MDMA affects your serotonin system, so not a good idea for you, my friend. Also, if your set or setting is not the vibe, which we'll chat about that more later, or if there's any concern for safety, if you don't know the dealer that gave you this MDMA, or if it's your first time taking it and you don't have a guide, definitely don't recommend taking that MDMA. And I hate to say this, folks, but if you are somebody that's just trying to fill a void, do not take MDMA. That's just not how that works, friend. Now, I'm sure you're wondering who should take MDMA. So if you go on PubMed, there's about 6,000 articles on MDMA. And there are some that says if you have PTSD, take MDMA. There are others that say if you have alcohol use disorder, take MDMA. And I am here to tell you that this is a bunch of BS. Do not go online and look up trials that have MDMA in them and then decide that because you have a condition that is listed in one of those trials that MDMA is for you. That is simply just not how that works. I absolutely, under no circumstances, would look somebody in the eye and say, hey, you have X, Y, or Z? Well, I recommend that you take MDMA. The only person that can determine why you should take MDMA is you. It's up to you to set your intention for why you want to take it and go on that journey for yourself. And while you're there, have an open mind, explore. But ultimately, you're the one that's going to determine why you need to take MDMA. And that's very important that you set that intention before you go on your journey. Now, MDMA, it is typically swallowed, and it can come as pressed pills, tablets, capsules, powder, crystal, liquid. Some folks do crush and snort it or smoke it. I will say that a significant higher concentration of MDMA does go into your system if you were to snort or to smoke it. And so I would recommend swallowing versus snorting or smoking if you wanted to choose the safer route for consumption. Now, the next question folks usually ask is, how much MDMA do I take? Well, I'm here to tell you, I don't know, friend. There is no way to know what that red alien head tablet has inside or how many milligrams is in that tablet. What I will say is that DanceSafe, this wonderful academy that gives awesome information on safer consumption of substances, it's been out here since the 90s. They do have a guideline in which they say 80 to 125 milligrams is recommend standard dosage. But unless you have pure MDMA that you can measure with a scale, it's impossible to know that, right? And so there are definitely some things you want to put into play to, try to get to that dosage. So for one, like I said earlier, know your dealer. Make sure that they for sure can vet what they're giving you. And this sounds shady, but maybe have a friend or somebody else try it first. If you're like, I just want that, double check. Also, I recommend starting off with a quarter of the tab if it's your very first time. maybe a half a tab if you're more experienced, and kind of going from there versus taking a whole tab and just like hoping for the best, right? Also, a way to know between a good dealer and a bad dealer, some green flags and red flags, is like asking them and hearing what they have to say. If they're like, girl, I don't know how much milligrams is in this tablet, take one or two, red flag. If they're like, actually, these are 100% pure MDMA and they're 100 milligram tablets, because it's your first time, maybe start off with a half a tab, and then after 90 minutes, if you're not feeling nothing, or if you want to see how that's going, add another quarter tab. Like that's your green flag, right? Now, typically the effects you might feel in about 20 to 40 minutes, but everybody's metabolism is different. It could technically even take up to 3 hours depending on your metabolism before it takes effect. And typically your peak will last between an hour and a half to 2 hours. We're looking at like 3 to 5 hours for the overall experience. Now, I don't recommend redosing, which is like adding more to your experience if you wanted to extend it, because it does increase that risk for side effects we were talking about, like the overly hot and the overly anxious. But if you do decide to redose, I do recommend waiting at least a minimum of 90 minutes from that peak experience and only redose with a half to a third of the original dose. Do not redose with the same original dose. Okay? And then, again, know your dealer. Ask questions. Every question you can think of, ask. Get all the information you need from the person who's giving you the drug before you take it. Now, I'm sure some people are like, oh my goodness, Ashakie, like, how do I even know if it's MDMA? You just like brought up like many red flags. Well, again, you don't, but by doing some of the things we just chatted about and taking some additional steps, hopefully we're making this a more safer experience, right? So another thing you can do is test your supply for fentanyl. I've added this beautiful instruction for how to do so from the Cook County Department of Public Health. I only chose this one because I just thought it was like a pretty and like straight to the point graphic, but there's lots of different graphics and informational pamphlets out there on how to use fentanyl test strips. Just keep in mind that fentanyl test strips were originally made for pee, to test for fentanyl in pee, and so they're not perfect. If you have some powder, you're going to separate some out and then test it, but the fentanyl might not necessarily be in that part of the powder, right? And so it's not a perfect scenario, but it is something that you can do to at least try to add an additional layer of safety to your situation you got going on. Also, say if your MDMA does have fentanyl in it or some other type of opioid, there is a risk for overdosing, right? And so you do want to know what those signs look like slow, shallow breathing, choking, limp body, pale blue, cold skin. And if you do believe that somebody in your group may have experienced overdose in that moment, you always want to make sure you have Narcan on hand. That quick little spray in the nose saves somebody's life. This is also, again, why it's important to not do MDMA or really any drugs by yourself if there's a risk for overdose, because you can't Narcan yourself, my friend. So do drugs with a friend is like one of my favorite logos, because by having a friend there that knows the signs of overdose and knows how to use Narcan, that can save your life. Another thing that you can use is a reagent test. Now, I've personally never used a reagent test before, and so I cannot 100% vet this, but again, I do trust Dance Safe. They're an awesome underground group, and they're always at these awesome festivals giving out great information. They do have MDMA testing kits with reagent tests that'll tell you whether or not the substance you have has an MDMA analog, such as MDA. They also have a different test that'll tell you whether there's MDA versus MDMA. And it's really easy. Essentially, the substance will change color with the reagent, and if it matches the chart, boom, you have what you're looking for. That is indeed MDMA. All right, so we tested our drugs. There's no fentanyl. it's truly MDMA. We've questioned the dealer for like an hour. We had our friend take it first. Now, what is the plan? Where are we going to take it? Now, it's very, very important that you create a container that feels safe for you when you decide to take MDMA. So, first, there's your set, which is essentially your mindset when you're going to be taking the substance. In that scenario, when you take MDMA, you want to ask questions like, do I feel comfortable? Do I feel supported? Do I feel prepared? Do I feel open? And again, do I understand my intentions? If the answer to any of these is no, friend, it's just not time for you to take MDMA in that moment. And also your setting, that's going to be where you're at. So, am I surrounded by people that make me feel relaxed? Do I feel comforted by the objects and the things that are around me? Do I feel safe, secure? Do I have the tools that I need, like nature or music, blanket? Again, if the answer to any of those are no, it's not time to take MDMA. You have not created the safe container that you need in order for you to have the safest experience for you in that moment. And so maybe you just got to table that, and that's okay. I look at this picture right here of Coachella, and even though that tends to be where so many people take MDMA for the very first time, that is just absolutely not passing my vibe check. I would not feel supported. I would not feel open. I don't even think I would even have an intention in that moment. And I would not feel comforted or relaxed or safe or secure. That's me. You might feel completely different about that though. And so for that reason, I still want you to have some great tools if you decide festival is going to be your setting. So if you want to do festival, just don't be the dog in the fire with the cup of coffee saying this is fine. You definitely want to do things to prevent overheating, like taking frequent breaks, bringing a handheld fan, bringing a mister. Because remember, that hyperthermia or that overheating, that is just naturally what MDMA is going to do to your body. And now you're in a desert in 100-degree weather. And so your risk of overheating, it's going to be pretty significantly high at that point. You also don't want to drink too much or too little water. Remember that thirst reflex we were talking about, it's not doing what it normally does. You also can even have some urinary retention. And so I recommend, if you are not active, to drink at least, or about rather, 250 milliliters an hour of water. And if you are active, 500 milliliters of water. You can get one of those water packs that like have the marks on them, and you can like write the times so you can keep yourself in check. Also set an alarm on your phone. Do what you gotta do. I also recommend checking your pee. That sounds so corny, but like firstly, make sure you pee, because sometimes you just don't feel like you want to. So if you gotta set that alarm, and when you pee, check it. If it's hella dark, you are not drinking enough water. And if it is super clear, you're drinking too much water. And again, caffeine is not your friend, so don't be the top dog. Instead, be the bottom dog. Look how relaxed and cool our friend feels. They probably went to the cool-off tent. They know where the medical tent is. They had an exit strategy. They also have a meetup point with their friend because they brought a map along. And they also have a cute little headband on that all your friends are matching so you can find each other. These are just some simple things I recommend doing to, again, have a more safer experience. In addition to those things, I recommend having a cute little festival safety kit. So, of course, your Narcan, even an emergency contact card. Some people will just Sharpie their info on their hand, like number for mom. That's fine. It works. Same with bringing eye shades and earplugs. Oh, if you're just like feeling hella overstimulated, hella overwhelmed, having the ability to just tune out for a moment and just catch a vibe would be awesome. Some people bring a mouth guard in case you are one of those people who are like grinding your teeth. Also, of course, electrolytes, vitamins. We're going to go over that lately, some that I do recommend. We already chatted about that hydration backpack, the fan, the mister, nutritional snacks, yum. That headband would be awesome. Now, I shouldn't say bring fentanyl test strips or reagent tests because, like, you do not know your dealer in this scenario if you're going to get MDMA from a random person at this festival, but still bring some because, like, what if your friends decide to not listen to my presentation and ignore all the amazing advice that you give them? Again, you still want to have those backup safety plans. Also, a map and map out some of those things you're talking about in the last slide. Watching a timer, remind yourself to go pee, remind yourself to drink your water. This is a beautiful safety kit to have with you so that you're just, you got it all planned out for worst case scenarios. Now, one of the main reasons why a festival would not be my vibe is because I feel like I would probably be in sensory overload. And I'm talking about like not on MDMA. So I definitely recommend for everybody to have a grounding technique practice that you practice prior to going to the festival. So that, say, if you are in sensory overload, you have some type of exercise, something in your back pocket that you can pull out to turn off that sympathetic nervous system, which is like fight, flight, freeze, anxiety, and to turn on that parasympathetic nervous system, which is like, we're gonna chill out, rest, digest. One of my favorites is the 5-4-3-2-1. Basically, you can do this anywhere. You look at 5 things that you see. So a tree, some grass, a speaker box, person with the hula hoop, some fire. You look at 4 things that you can touch. So you actually touch 4 different things. Then you listen for 3 different things. And if all you can hear is music, it can be, I hear the drums, I hear the bass, I hear the violin. And then you smell 2 different things. And so I'd recommend even having like peppermint or butterscotch candy in your safety kit for this exercise. And then you taste 1. So yum, that grandma's peppermint is coming into play right now. And by turning on those 5 senses, it's a wonderful way to ground yourself because, the odds of having sensory overload without MDMA, pretty high at a festival. Add MDMA, it's even higher. And so I recommend practicing these beforehand. I also recommend maybe even doing some stretches or some yoga before you're dosing because remember, it can increase muscle aches and things like that. And so definitely recommend having this as a part of your safety toolkit as well. Now, another way that some folks decide to do MDMA for the first time or for the millionth time, whatever, it might be a guided ceremony, which is when you have a guide or a healer or a shaman, somebody who's there bringing you throughout your MDMA journey and supporting you and being there for you and holding space for you and bringing a safer container for you to have a beautiful journey. Now, I definitely 1,000,000% recommend looking up the Women's Visionary Council that has this beautiful article. It's 20 safety tips for those participating in ceremonies that use psychoactive substances. It's free and it's amazing. Now, this is just like some quick bullet points that I picked out because this is like supposed to be a 10-minute presentation and we're already on 23 minutes. But definitely read this article in full because it has some great stuff. So for one, if I'm going to recommend know your dealer, I'm definitely going to recommend know your guide. Definitely do some research, check out the reputation, ask folks who have gone with this person before, what do they recommend? How do they do their quality checks of the substances that they're providing you? What's the lodging like? Is it safe? Is it a vibe? Also, is this local? Is this far? Is it in another country? You definitely want to know the law jurisdiction and the place that you're going to be having this ceremony. I also recommend, if you can, bring a trusted friend or a neutral observer that can not only be there to hold space, but also maybe to just like look at what's going on because you're not going to be in a consensual state and things can happen and you would want somebody there to observe and be a part of the experience in case things don't go as planned. Speaking of which, you definitely want to ask the person that's guiding you ahead of time, like, hey, what is your accountability plan? Say if you do touch me in a way that I do not feel comfortable, what is the plan for that? How are you being held accountable for that? I also recommend definitely having a spiritual allyship or a guardian contact in place, whatever that means for you, both before the ceremony and during the ceremony. It's so important to have that contact with whomever you believe in during that ceremonial time, so that if there's ever a time you need them, they are there for you, they're supporting you, they're a part of this experience with you. And I definitely recommend having very strong psychic boundaries during this experience as well. Same with physical boundaries. Let folks know ahead of time, this is where you cannot touch me, this is where you may touch me. These are my words for, like, if I absolutely do not want you to touch me anymore, etc. Also, make sure you get mentally checked out, physically checked out before this experience. A lot of those things we were talking about, like if you have high blood pressure, right, you want to make sure that that's checked out before you go on this experience. Refuse to be victimized. 100%. If there is anything going on that you do not feel comfortable with, vocalize at that moment. Call in your neutral observer friend and not only speak about it in that moment, also speak about it after, not just at the conclusion, but days after, whatever needs to be done so that that person is held accountable for their actions. Do not be a victim in this scenario. Also, I recommend having an aftercare plan. So, what does your day look like after your ceremony? How are you taking care of yourself both that evening, the day after, the days after? Definitely wait at least 3 to 7 days, whatever that means for you, prior to making any judgment calls. For example, sex. If you do not go on Tinder, Grindr, whatever, the night of your ceremony and be like, hey, want to hook up? Like, that's not the day. Like, wait at least a week for that. And also just keep in mind that even though you may have desire to have some type of sexual experience with your guide during your journey, that is just not the time or the space. Even if it's something that you're like in that moment while you're having your experience, decide 100% you want to be a part of, there's absolutely no consent in a scenario where there is such a large power dynamic, such as a guide bringing you on a journey, and you are under the influence of a substance that just takes away your ability to provide consent in that moment. And so please do not go into ceremony or during ceremony have the decision that you would like to have sex with your guide. This is not something that I would recommend. And the last setting that we're going to talk about is solo dolo. So if you decide that you want to do MDMA by yourself. So I put a very large X over solo because I just 100% zillion trillion times do not recommend this. Again, if you are having an overdose, nobody can Narcan you. You cannot Narcan yourself. And so I don't recommend it. But if you decide that you want to, because remember, this is a non-judgmental space, I definitely at least recommend doing some of these things. So for one, share your location with a friend. Do not decide to go to Hogwarts Castle in the middle of the woods and not let anybody know where you're at. Also, maybe pick a friend that you're letting them know, like, hey, I'm using MDMA at this time. Check in me at X o'clock. If I don't call you back by X o'clock, then Y. Definitely make that plan. Also, some people like making what I like to call a calm down clock, which is like you write a note to yourself that's like, I took MDMA at 2 p.m. and this should last about 4 hours. Love, Dr. Phil. Because say if you have your journey, you have your experience, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, like, what am I doing in the woods? What's going on? Which that can happen. having that little note there, and again, signed by you, so you know it was you that wrote it, that can be an awesome like reality check, right? And say if you're like not having the best time, maybe you're feeling overly anxious, having that note to tell you like, hey, this isn't going to last forever. This is only going to last a couple more hours. Sometimes that can help you as well. I also recommend, again, fluid checks, pee checks, having that water bottle or that water bag that show you like how much you drank and what time you need to drink it by, and having that timer to tell you like go sit on the toilet at this time to remind you to pee. Good idea. And then the rest is just same thing as what we talked about before: the mouth guard, electrolytes, snacks, grounding exercises, stretching, yoga beforehand. These are good things to do that might help you have a safer experience. Now, here are some supplements that are from this awesome group called Users News, similar to some of the other organizations we chatted about in this presentation. They offer wonderful, wonderful insight into things you can do to have safer consumption. And not only do they provide you like what supplements should you take and when should you take them, they also provide information that's like why you should use a supplement and what is the supplement made out of, and so that you can have like a seriously informed exploration of supplements before you take your MDMA. Now, again, I'm not the FDA. None of this is evidence-based. Like, there's not randomized controlled trials telling you like this is what you should take, but from anecdotal information, it sounds like these things would help with that hijacking of the serotonin system that we were talking about, so that you can not only have like a more healthier, shall we say, experience, but also hopefully a less of what some folks like to call the calm down blues after your experience. Now, I don't really like the term calm down blues because it's like, no, there's a lot of stigma with that term. And it's not like, MDMA, like, oh, you're on cloud nine and then the next day it's like death. No, but, there is some truth to that. And that, again, hijacking of the serotonin system. And so the next day there's a depletion in some parts of your body and your brain where maybe you just feel a little but not all hope is lost, folks. I definitely have some things that I recommend doing that next day to help with some of those feelings. So for one, supplements that we talked about, definitely want to take some of these for the 3 to 7 days following your dropping of MDMA. But also, most importantly, you really just want to take care of yourself. And it's quite awesome to just kind of design what that looks like for you before your journey, so that you already have a plan and everything's in play, and all you gotta do is just wake up and do it the next day. And so maybe that's loving on your dog, or doing yoga, or taking a bath, or having a prepared healthy meal waiting for you. Maybe it's meditation, maybe it's turning off your phone, journaling, whatever that means. Just make sure you have a self-care plan the next day so that you feel a little bit less ick after your serotonin system has, basically been hijacked. So that's all, folks. Now, just don't forget, the views and opinions of this video do not reflect or represent the views and opinions of me, Dr. Ashakie Phillips, or California Institute of Integral Studies, or my amazing mentor, Dr. Maria Mangini, or awesome Home Group 11 or Mentor Group. It just means that this is the information that we got at this time from anecdotal information and storytelling, and it means even more that you and I and this wonderful, wonderful group of plant medicine folks in this country need to do more work contacting the FDA and letting them know, hey, we need you to approve more studies so that we can get more randomized controlled trials, so that we can have more information for folks to safely consume MDMA. And that's all, folks. Here's the references if you'd like to look up some of the information that we chatted about today. And thank you so much.